Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Over the last few months, we have had many comments asking us to do some kind of review or asking us on our opinion of this book here, The Freedom Model. Now, there was a guy on YouTube about 11 months ago. He's not actually posted in a while, but he went onto YouTube and he started talking about how he tried loads of things to try and stop watching porn. And then finally he came across this book and this method, the Freedom Model, and he was getting really, really good results. And he started to share that, and he was like, "Yep, everyone should, go learn this method. It's amazing. It's blown his mind, etc., etc." So I was actually really, really intrigued to read the Freedom Model myself. So I went ahead, and for the last few weeks, this is what I've been doing. I've just been reading this book and analyzing it. This copy is completely full now of green and red highlighted notes by myself. And today we're going to be exploring the Freedom Model and analysing it. And yeah, looking forward to getting into it. So welcome on the podcast, Mary. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good today. I feel I'd say probably a 9 out of 10, which is really good for me.
Maybe you should go in the lake every night.
Right? Yeah. Drive up to the lake and take a dip every night. Yeah. I could do it. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's an hour drive, so it's not a short jaunt, but yeah, it was worth it. So
yeah, nice. So getting into the Freedom Model then. Have you heard of this before prior to me talking about it, or is this quite new to you?
I'd never heard of it, but they're in the US, right?
Yeah, they're in the States.
Yeah.
I think they're based in New York. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So I guess I can kind of start off by just sharing what I took away from reading this, and then I'm sure we'll get into many flaws in it, but then also many good points in it as well.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of good points. Yeah.
There's definitely some really, really good points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I think out of all the books I've read on addiction, this is definitely one of the best ones. I would put it top 5 quite comfortably. And the reason for that is it actually uses language which I think really empowers people, and there's a lot of truth in it as well. I definitely learned a few things about science and what's happened and how the rehab centers and the 12 steps and the therapists have ended up going down a certain route as well, which has been incredibly fascinating, because a lot of the stuff they've said in here has been the things that you've been saying to me for like 18 months plus now, but there's just even more science to actually back up those claims that you've been saying. Because although I believed you based on my own personal experience of using your method, at the same time, it's like one woman saying something versus like just a complete ton of scientific research to kind of provide the evidence to back up the things that you've said about how rehab and 12 steps can actually lead to more helplessness, and this idea of, removing triggers and people not being in control of themselves actually being quite false a lot of the time. And really what's happened is their thoughts and their beliefs have changed over time, and then they've ended up going down the wrong route with treatment and recovery programs, which haven't actually dealt with the real problem, which is how do you change your thoughts, your beliefs, and how do you deal with urges. With that being said, this book, it doesn't really provide the actual go-to, like what do you do in that moment of compulsive desire, which is where we're very, very different. But yeah, just based on what I was saying there, Mary, do you have any kind of reflections and any thoughts come to your mind?
Well, yeah, just because I've done this work with this methodology for 35 years, all the other stuff that's going on out there seemed really obvious to me, that it's perpetuating addictive behaviors, right? And making things worse as we watch, the addiction epidemic just spiraling out of control. And of course, the obesity epidemic, food addiction, right? Spiraling out of control. That all just seemed really obvious to me, but I'm really grateful to have some people that maybe have more credibility than me. I guess I don't have that much credibility, but that's okay, whatever. But coming up with all this scientific evidence to kind of back what I've been going, hey, look, take a look what's happening. Open your eyes. That's all you got to do, But without this understanding of how addiction works that I have working with all these people all these years, it's not obvious to people, I guess, So good on them for doing the scientific research. That's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And for anyone kind of wondering, like, okay, well, what does the freedom model really suggest? I think it would be hard for me to completely summarize it on one podcast. But in a nutshell, they basically say, look, addiction is a social construct, okay? People have created this word, and then you've got the rehab centers and the 12 steps, and they've come in and they've tried to provide a solution to a problem that is socially constructed. It doesn't really actually exist. And what's happened is that people are giving all their sort of mental power away to drugs and alcohol, and they're kind of putting these things on a pedestal. But really, the truth is that your thoughts and your beliefs matter more, because you're a human with consciousness. And what's happened is these laboratory rats have been explored in, many different studies many years ago, and people have kind of extrapolated data from these studies and have gone, okay, well, because the rat acts in this way, that means that humans are also going to act in this way. And a lot of it's based on Skinner's work many years ago. So a lot of it's around, operant conditioning. If X, then that equals Y, sort of this idea. But it doesn't take into account that, well, actually, humans are not rats. Like, it's such a simple thing. But basically, a lot of the neuroscience is completely flawed because it doesn't take into account free will and autonomy and the ability to make choices that humans have, and the power that we have within our own mind, and the ability we have to make rational choices. And what they say is that your decision to consume certain substances or alcohol, that's really a preference, and you're choosing a happier option. Now that I find very interesting, especially within the context of pornography. So do you want to jump in here, Mary?
Well, I don't know if I need to jump in, but the whole thing with the rats. I mean, I've heard studies that they did with rats. Um, I had a few meetings with this pediatric endocrinologist up at the Oregon Health Sciences University who was studying addictive behaviors, and the rats there, they were giving them cocaine, and they noticed that when they would give it to them intermittently, they would literally wait for that cocaine, and they would stop doing, they would stop eating, they wouldn't play, they wouldn't reproduce, they wouldn't do anything. They'd just sit there and wait for that next hit of this cocaine, and I mean, to me, that's a very compelling desire happening there, not just a preference. Oh, this, if I get this cocaine out of this little machine, it's going to make me feel happier. So I can just, but again, I guess that's to your point where rats and humans are very different, right? The humans
Mm.
could have a lot of thoughts in that process, where the rats are just like, give it to me. But I think that to use the word just when it comes to addictive desire is, there's so much more to it, so much more, especially with the humans. And, we work with a lot of smart guys, right? And they're very smart in their addictive thinking as well, very, very creative and shrewd. So, it's, comparing rats to humans is, like you say, I don't know how particularly useful that is really, but anyway, I don't know. I've got off track.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess I don't know if they actually use the word like just in here. To be fair, I'm probably just
you
saying that
used it.
myself. Yeah, I use that
Yeah,
word for sure.
yeah,
But I do feel like they downplay how difficult it can be to have these desires and these thoughts and these beliefs. But I think they do that intentionally to try and
yeah,
suggest, look, you're the one in control. You're the one with the choice. You don't
yeah.
have to give power to the porn or the drugs or the alcohol. It is you making these choices
Mm-hmm.
for yourself, because in that moment, you prefer that option and you want to engage in your compulsive behavior, which is kind of similar to what we say. But where I what I don't quite understand is how that could explain tolerance, and how in the past when I would be looking at porn, how I'd start off okay,
Sorry.
how I'd start off, I'd look at something sexual for maybe a few minutes, and then
Yeah,
over time that sort of preference would change, and I'd end up looking at things that actually I didn't really feel like I wanted to be looking at. And like
yeah,
at first, if I had have looked at that at the very start, before the tolerance kind of kicked in,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been repelled. I don't think I honestly would have wanted to have looked at those certain things, but it's almost like my thought pattern and my belief in that moment felt like I want to look at the thing that disgusts me the most so that I can sort of stop looking at this in the future. And there's just some bullshit going on from the
Yeah.
addicted part of the mind, right? So I think there's something there about, the addicted part of the mind in moments of compulsive desire is the one sort of using the mind. It's doing the thinking, and it's trying to just get you to engage in your compulsive behavior. So I think there is something there about, there is some compulsivity there. It's not just a choice. You're not just doing what makes you happy, right?
Well, the thing is that with the tolerance, there's, I mean, they've used aversion therapy in the past, right? Where you're going to look at this thing that disgusts you, right? Or people are going to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes nonstop to disgust themselves about, that addiction, right? Or people are just going to go eat. Oh gosh, sorry, I keep kicking my thing. Eat everything in sight, right? And then they're going to somehow be disgusted, that aversion therapy. But that it doesn't work because pain like that doesn't have memory. You know what I mean? It's ignoring the fact that you do something like that, you're just feeding the tolerance cycle rather than you're going to be like, oh, that was so horrible, I'm not going to want to do it again. No, you're going to want to do it more and probably get more extreme the next time because you're just increasing that tolerance cycle. It's yeah. And again, too, there's so much talk about, oh, people just have the choice, choosing. Well, that disregards so much, like I said, very shrewd addictive thinking. That's very convincing. And then you add that addictive thinking to just the desire that's kind of like feels like it's in your body and it's compelling desire, right? Add all this shrewd addictive thinking, and then you know, that choice, it doesn't feel like a choice at that point. It feels like you're just going to do it just because you want to relieve this discomfort of these feelings and this thinking that is going on, right? So I think they missed on the how to again, but we'll get to that, I guess.
Yeah, I think you made a really, really good point there that pain doesn't have a memory. You've said this a
Mhm.
few times that if you could remember how painful like childbirth is, for example, very, very few women would ever have a second child.
Right, exactly. Yeah, nobody would. If you could remember that pain, exactly. Yeah, it just diminishes over time. So,
Mm, And I
yeah.
really relate to that because when I used to do the streaks, I was able to go a few weeks or a few months, and it was blatantly obvious that life was significantly better without choosing to watch porn. My
Yeah.
life was, I felt more confident, I felt happier. Although, sure, I at that point in time, when I was doing the streaks before I met you, I didn't have a solution to this problem. I didn't know how to deal with the urges correctly and really change those neural pathways. But even on those streaks, I did feel better. And so, you'd think, okay, well, that's the happier choice. You've learned, okay, well, life without porn's a happier choice. And so if it was as simple as, you just naturally go through this iterative process of realizing what the happier choice is,
Right.
um, why would I ever have gone back and watched porn and stayed in a
Right.
cycle of relapsing every, few weeks for
Yeah.
years and years and years?
Which is kind of their bent, right? You just realize this is a happier choice, right? And like you say, you did it on the streaks, and all the guys, they go on these streaks, which is to me is so detrimental because they don't make any real changes, and then they relapse, and now they're intermittently reinforcing, getting in deeper. If it was that simple to just be like, oh well, this is the happier place, this is a happier choice, it's minimizing, that addictive thinking that really needs to be addressed in order to make that permanent change, so that you
Mm,
can, oh, I feel better not doing this, but if I'm not making the real changes in my brain, I'm going to end up, have a real compelling desire down the road, and there you are back in it.
mm,
Intermittent
mm.
reinforcement is really very powerful. It's very underestimated. Like with the obesity epidemic, all the diets by nature intermittently reinforce the behavior. I'm going to go on this strict diet for 30 days. We're going to do a challenge, whatever. And then, I mean, even like there's one plan that had what they called the blow it day, right? So you go 6 days on during the week, regimented, hard, eating like a bird or whatever and working out all the time. And then you have your blow it day, which you're just going to eat everything in sight and lay on the couch all day or whatever. So, well, and here we are, addiction epidemic, obesity epidemic, it's intermittent reinforcement is really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of that addictive thinking that you talk about there, for anyone listening who's maybe a bit unsure, like what are we on about? That's kind of the certain thought patterns, which could be junky thoughts, as we call them. So any
Mm-hmm.
rationalization, excuse, justification to go ahead and engage in your compulsive behavior. So I'll give you a few examples of mine in the past. It'd be things like, I'll just look once and then I'm going to stop. Or maybe it's, I'll start again tomorrow, or I'm really stressed out right now. I just want to watch some porn to relax,
I
or
remember when
you go
you
on.
had the one was, if I choose to engage and I relapse, then I'm going to feel really bad and I'm going to learn something from it. Remember, you were going to learn from your, from doing it. And that was going to make you like, it was part of your journey. I remember that when I met you. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a really, really good one,
Yeah.
because that sort of thought pattern isn't really explained in this book, how the addicted part of the mind will literally try any bullshit on you to get you to
Shrewd.
engage. It's so shrewd. Yeah, it's smart. And we've worked with some really, really clever people with crazy jobs and businesses and all sorts. And
Yeah.
these guys have all these very, really, really smart, junky thoughts. Because, from our perspective, we believe there is like these kind of different parts of the mind. Like you have the rational part of the mind, the addicted part of the mind. And as you say, Mary, in the past, the addicted part of my mind would convince me with this complete bullshit junky thought that I'd somehow improve in life by relapsing, and that every single time I was relapsing, then I'd learn something. And
Yeah.
that was, I suppose, based on this idea of, okay, well, now I'll remove more triggers, or now I need
Yeah.
to, meditate more, or I need to go to the gym more, which, to be fair to them, in this book, they completely agree with us on the idea that, okay, well, actually, all of those things are just distractions because you've not actually changed your thoughts and beliefs. So you could go to the gym for 2 hours every single day, but until you've actually changed your thought patterns, your beliefs, nothing's going to change. You're going to end up finishing that workout and you're still going to have that desire to watch porn. So, they actually talk more about alcohol and drug addiction in this book. They don't even really talk about porn that very much at all. But yeah, I think that is something that they're quite in alignment with us on, but we're probably a bit more proactive and attacking in addressing the compulsive desire,
Yeah.
rather than a bit more of a passive, iterative approach of, okay, we're just going to kind of try things out, see how it goes, and then we'll naturally kind of come to a conclusion for ourselves, which
Yeah.
they sort of suggest, I believe.
Yeah. Think about like, oh, the addiction is not as glamorous as we think. And then think, oh, it would be nice to not be in that. That would be a better, happier place. It's just not enough. And I agree to a certain extent on that. They're making addiction out to be too big of a thing because we talk about helplessness all the time, and when they talk about that, it's going to be so incredibly difficult, and once you're addicted, you're an addict for life, and all this stuff does not work in someone's favor because it puts them into a state of helplessness, or all the labels and everything, and the label being an addict, rather than the way we look at it, you're having addictive desire now, it's very different. But yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it really is helpful. It's not helpful enough. I mean, it's good to see that it's not, you're not helpless, that it's not this thing that you're going to struggle with forever and ever, and you're always going to be susceptible to relapse because you have that ability to change those pathways, and then maybe you do have a desire down the road at some point, but you're not constantly living in this state of on the edge, like, oh my God, when is something going to happen that I'm going to relapse again? And you just know, oh, well, if it did have some random desire at some point, I know exactly how to deal with it. And you have that knowing, which is incredibly powerful and balances out any of those feelings of helplessness, which I think the way addiction is viewed in our society, which they're talking out against, which is great, that people are just helpless in the face of it, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And they're very, very sort of direct and almost confrontational against, the traditional conventional methods of dealing with addiction in the States in particular, because they've looked into the research and the data, and they've basically found that if you go to like rehab, you're no more likely really to succeed in overcoming addiction than someone who hasn't. And what I did find really interesting though, which seemed a bit strange, is that they seem to suggest that most people actually overcome their addictions on their own naturally through the course of their life, especially if they don't end up going to these sort of rehabs or 12 steps, because
Mm.
they naturally over time realize for themselves, like, oh yeah, this isn't the better option for me, and they come to their own
Well,
preferences.
that's good. I think that, but how much of a journey do you want it to be? Learning on your own, and probably, going down the road of substitution, maybe coming up with other addictions, and then maybe by the time you're my age or something, then you've like maybe figured it out and overcome some stuff. But why not just go at it? Why not just go at it? You can get the education, change your pathways, and be at your age going, okay, cool. I get to go through my life not being dragged around by compulsive desire. I, you know, I mean, yeah, maybe people figure it out. And, with rehab, I've heard more than one story for sure about people that go into rehab, and then it's probably their feelings of deprivation the whole time they're in there, which they could leave anytime they want. But um, then they go out and then they overdose and die, like the
Yeah.
opiate addicts and stuff. They're just like, after so much feelings of deprivation, they're like, give me it, let's go. And then they overdose. It's just not. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard a really good successful rehab story. Have you? I
No, I've
mean,
never
Matthew
met
Perry
anyone.
went in like 9 times or something to rehab.
Yeah.
You
I remember
know.
once I had a podcast guest called Jess on the show. She actually came into the studio I'm in today. And I remember talking to her, and then not even that long after our conversation, so she worked in rehab and she'd go off to like Switzerland and do rehab centers there.
Mhm.
But not even that long after our conversation, she completely left that field. And it doesn't surprise me, because my guess is that she probably got sick and tired of seeing that it doesn't work just over and over. And yeah, what they would definitely say in this book, in the freedom model, what they'd agree with us on is that if you go into like rehab or maybe 12 steps, there's a good chance you're going to be almost coerced, sort of trying to be controlled into like making a choice. Like, you definitely can't engage in this behavior. You can't, for us, the guys we work with, you can't watch porn. You got to be zero tolerance. You've got to remove all your triggers. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. All
Yeah.
these kind of rules and conditions for living. And they would agree with us that that isn't healthy, that isn't natural, and actually it gets you into feelings of deprivation, where if you have that thought pattern of I can't do this thing over and over, you end up wanting to do it even more because you're
Right.
so frustrated and irritable and
Yeah.
agitated, and you want to get out of those feelings, so you go
Yeah.
ahead and do this thing.
Yeah, you're right. Like someone yesterday we uncovered some feelings of or some deprivation, thinking that they were having, because they were having that ongoing irritability and feeling anger and snapping at people around them and stuff like that. It's like when you reframe it, and use the tools that we have, you can actually feel pretty good about it. But my guess is they're not going to have those tools in the rehab center. Well, for sure they're not, unless they're in violation of copyright or whatever. But, I've always thought how cool that would be. Well, I've told you I want to get a place in Hawaii, right? And Maui, and we can have the rehab center where we bring the guys in, or any addicts, it doesn't have to just be pornography, obviously, but bring them in where we reinforce the script day in and day out, and that I think would be really helpful. But, just putting someone in an environment where they don't have any access and they're supposed to be not doing it, right? And then maybe in group talk about, I don't know, maybe they're doing deep breathing, meditation, talk therapy, whatever, and not really getting in there and making those permanent changes in the moment of compulsive desire, getting them through that withdrawal process. Then, I don't know. I feel like rehab is, like they say in the freedom model, it's detrimental, it really is. But you say that kind of stuff, and, people in the field are going to come at you and go, what are these clowns saying,
Yeah,
We should wear
exactly.
clown hats on the next podcast.
Yeah,
Clown
and
nose.
another point I really wanted to get across here is I just spoke about, in the past, with these studies, they've managed to sort of get across that, okay, most people come to their own natural conclusion.
Yeah.
But I do think, this was written, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago. What I think is going to happen over the next 20 years, and I think it's already happening at a very, very scary rate, is that people are chasing this new sort of high, a new way of thinking, or a dramatic sort of gimmick, or like a shiny object syndrome. Basically, people are jumping from hack to hack, method to method, tip to tip, and that's like the kind of language that people use nowadays online, right? It's like 10 top hacks or 10 top tips, or this kind of language, right? And with short form media and content in particular, I think all of this sort of stuff is actually going to make the addiction epidemic even worse for people, because I don't think people are going to have that time to kind of reflect internally themselves and think through things, because they're so wrapped up and warped up in the social media world and the algorithms, and their mind's kind of going from one place to another to another to another.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly than anything else, right, is the misinformation. And that's what this book talks about, is that when you look at the science and you do your research, as well as these guys have, and fair respect to them for doing that, what you discover is that a lot of information makes the problem worse for people. And that is 100% true for NoFap, 100%. Because for me, I don't think I would have ended up binging and edging to some fucked up shit if it wasn't for the fact that I was in such deep feelings of deprivation and doing these streaks, and I'd been taught all this bullshit about how I wasn't in control of myself and that I needed to remove the triggers and meditate for an hour every day and make sure I was going to the gym and staying busy and on my purpose and journaling and cold showers and just doing this complete load of nonsense that had nothing to do with that moment where I had an urge and I didn't know what to do. And that whole thing, that whole cycle of feeling like I was doing everything right and then still relapsing, made things significantly worse, so much worse for me. And so I think going forward, unless you have the right education and someone's actually trained in, thoughts and beliefs, what's going on in the mind, and they're changing what's going on in the mind. And, we do that by changing people's neural pathways with the script, giving them the tool to do that anyway. We can't do it ourselves, but we provide the education. Unless you have that, it's going to be very, very hard to overcome addiction. And I think that's something that we'd probably agree with this book on. And yeah, I think it's a point to make anyway. What do you think about that, Mary?
Well, I was just thinking what you were saying about the, you know, being online and then having all these options, it's like too many choices, that in itself is compulsive, I try to sometimes shop online, like I need to get some clothes and I don't want to go to the mall or, whatever. And just even that there's so many choices, looking at things on a screen and online, it's frustrating to me. I just want to like throw my phone against the wall and go, to hell with it. I'll just wear the same shit, I can't shop like this, but like if you've already got this compulsive desire and you're doing like the porn, and if you're looking for solutions and you're looking for content, you're looking, the more they're putting out there, the more susceptible people are going to be to just staying really in that cycle and in that loop, rather than going, okay, let's hold the bus here and let's get an education. What's going on with my brain? What is happening very specifically when I feel compelled to engage in this behavior? You know, we don't have to go back into history and deal with all the trauma and all that stuff. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but what specifically do I need to do? And then focusing on just that and doing it. You know, I tell every single one of the guys in Liberation Day call, you know, leave behind any preconceived notion about how to solve this problem and just go all in on this method, and that's where you're going to have the best chance of success. You know, I mean, I'm working with a guy recently who's done, oh my god, so many things. He's done literally every kind of therapeutic thing you can think of, you know, to try to overcome his addiction. And I just told him, I said, if you're still hanging on to that stuff and still working with that stuff, it's not going to align with what I'm going to teach you, you know? So you want to just put that to the side and dive in. Let's go, you know? And he's in, we're going. So yeah, but there's so much. And then there's, I mean, every day there's more and more and more and more. So yeah, I think I spoke to your point.
Yeah, definitely. I had a message last week from a guy who said, I am 22 years old and I've had this problem going on for maybe 10 years. So very, very standard, right? Around 12, 12 years old, same age as me when I got started on this stuff.
Don't make
He
me
said,
cry again, Tom.
I know. He said, I tried quitting and acknowledged my problem in the summer of 2022. And yeah, now I'm here. I want to ask how your method differs from the freedom model, easy peasy, flying eagle, etc.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I replied to him and I was saying how, it's one of the things I said to him is like, okay, things can be like really confusing because there's so much different information and it can be kind of hard to know who to trust, where to go. There's all these different methods now, and one of the reasons I wanted to start doing these podcasts and this series now where we've analysed the easy peasy method. Now we're doing the freedom model. Next, maybe we do the flying eagle, whatever that is. I kind of just want to share our perspective on things. And I think overall, what we believe and our method, what's unique about it is it comes down to really, really simply, how do you deal with urges in the moment that you have the urge, right? And I think unless your approach, in my opinion, tackles with that one problem, which is the main problem, because if you think about it, if you knew how to deal with all urges at all times, you'd be good, right? If you know how to deal with that correctly in a way that actually changes the underlying thought patterns and beliefs, you're going to be good. How could you not be good if you know how to deal with literally your urges and you're thinking it through in a rational way? I think the other caveat there, though, is that you would also need to do it from a place of, okay, I'm choosing this for myself. There's a lot more information there, I suppose, about, getting out of feelings of deprivation, feeling like it is a choice in that moment, connecting to the desire in the right way, maybe kind of changing the neural pathway around the shame and things like that. But that is the most essential thing, whether it's the freedom model or you go to a different method, just make sure whatever you choose, it's focused on in that moment when you have an urge and you have that desire and the addictive part of the mind saying all this bullshit, which it will, what do you actually do? How do you respond? And I think that's where a lot of these methods go wrong, is there can be a lot of information, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of theory, and it's very, very interesting. But then what do you do in that moment?
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing to this problem, in our opinion, from our perspective.
Yeah. Because the majority of the information available, I mean, they get real creative, but it basically comes back down to finding a way to distract yourself from it. Find a way to not think about it, And I mean, some people are getting a little bit more into sit with the feelings or whatever. But sitting with the feelings is not enough either, you have to have a way to sit with the feelings, because if you got feelings of deprivation going on in the withdrawal process, withdrawal is uncomfortable enough. You add feelings of deprivation, you're fucked. You know what I mean? It's like, so you got to, be addressing those things very specifically in that moment to make those changes, because, people can run and run and run and run, but said it a million times, compulsive desire refuses to be ignored. So let's find a way to address it directly when it's
Yeah,
refusing to be ignored. Yeah.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I did find really interesting about the freedom model, though, which I would agree with, is that they focus more on, okay, so what's going to be like the benefits of this choice? Let's say you did want to abstain from a certain drug. Why would you be doing that? It's not just about the consequences, which I do agree with. You know, obviously the consequences are going to be pretty severe if you're in an addiction of any kind. But where most people go wrong is they primarily focus on that. And it's just these thought patterns of, well, I can't watch porn anymore. You know, this is so bad. It's destroying my life. It's impacting my marriage. Oh, my confidence is
Yeah.
shattered. I'm wasting so much time. I feel such a lack of energy. And that's the only thing they can really think about when you're in that addiction. And that's what the addictive part of the mind is going to be in favor of
Well,
because, go
yeah,
ahead,
go
Mary.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, the addictive part of the mind is going to want you, you know, having all these thoughts like can be self-deprecating and feeling pretty terrible about
Mm-hmm.
yourself, all this frustration. And I want you to focus just on the downside of things because if it can do that, it'll get you into helplessness, maybe into deprivation, and then again you go fuck it and you choose to engage again, you relapse.
Yeah.
Whereas the freedom model, what they're going to do is that they're kind of talking about, okay, well, actually, what's the other side like? How could life be if you actually did choose for yourself to abstain from this substance? And I think that's really, really important. And I just want to, before you make your point, Mary, I just want to bring up this message from a client yesterday within the Beyond Compulsion Academy, because I think this kind of tells that story better than anything I could really say. And, you know, we could
Yes.
sit here and talk all day about the program and our method and whatnot, but I feel like it carries more weight when it comes from someone we've actually helped very recently in particular. So what he said, this is on the weekly check-in post. We send that every Monday. He wrote, "It's been a solid week, no major wins to report, but I've noticed a big improvement in my focus compared to just a few months ago. It's funny. I remember telling Tom that one of my biggest concerns before starting this program was whether I'd have enough time for it, but committing to it has actually given me time back. I used to lose so much time caught in cycles of frustration and self-deprecation, feelings I blamed on external pressures like study or life in general. But the truth is, they were being driven by my addiction. The addicted part of the mind would constantly pitch porn as a solution to those feelings. And I tell myself I just need to engage so I can move on and focus again. But as we all know, that never works. It only makes the cycle worse. That feels like a lifetime ago. With 2 months until I submit my PhD thesis, I honestly couldn't imagine a better time to have stumbled upon this program." So that's from one of our clients. He's just shared that this week. And I thought that was really important because he's talking there about the benefits, how he has so much more time, you know, more
Mm-hmm.
focus to actually concentrate on what's really important to him, like his PhD thesis. Whereas there can be this misconception, like if I stop engaging in porn or, you know, I stop using the drugs or the alcohol, or whatever, then, you know, what am I going to do? You know, I'm going to be fucked. Like it's going to be too hard. It's going to be too difficult. My mind's going to be all over the place. But if you do it in the right way, you're going to get way more time back. You get focus back. You have all these benefits in your life. Like there's so many benefits, and it is important to recognize like, okay, this is actually a really enjoyable, great option for you that you can do if you have, you know, a certain way of thinking about things. So Mary, do you want to jump in here now?
Yeah. Well, junkie thinking 101 is I don't have time to deal with this, right? And then what I also heard something that you were saying that was off into the future, and I can't remember what it is now. But the junkie thinking 101, I don't have time for sure. You know, we addressed that literally right before they even stop. You know, we do a lot of work before people stop the behavior to prepare them for what's going to happen, right? But then you're saying, you know, focusing on the bad, people end up focusing just on the bad. Oh, I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want this. I don't want that, which goes completely against getting connected to the desire, right? You can't get connected to the desire if you're focused on, oh, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it because I don't want all this stuff, right? And then, and then, okay, so now freedom model, they bring in, you know, the good and the bad, right? So now you have the good. It's like, oh, focus on the good, focus on the bad. Okay, that's good. Yes, that's really productive to have, to know this is what I get if I'm not using porn. This is what I get if I am. But without the powerful tool to deal to be able to stay in that moment of compulsive desire when the addictive part of the mind is trying to convince you that, oh, the bad's not really that bad, and am I really going to get all that good? All of the convoluted junky thinking that happens during the peaks of withdrawal. If you don't have a tool right there and then to go, okay, I'm going to stay with this through this withdrawal, and I'm going to make this choice for what I want. It's just too broad to go, oh, this is good, this is bad. And maybe over time, I'm going to somehow get like, oh, the good is better. So I'm going to go with that. No, underestimating it,
Yeah,
in my
that's a really good
opinion.
point. Yeah, and I think what comes up for me is the thought that I used to have often, which would be, once won't hurt. I just have
Yeah.
a quick peek, and I used to tell myself like, I'll
Yeah.
just scroll on Instagram for a bit, and then I'm
Yeah.
gonna stop. And then I don't end up doing it more and more and more
Yeah.
until I'm like looking at freaking. I won't even say what I used to look at right now, but just some crazy
Yeah.
shit on Instagram. And my brain's just like absolutely fried, and I'm feeling
Yeah.
horrendous, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
Once
thing is
won't
with
hurt, right?
yeah.
All that bad. You're not going to have all that bad because you're only going to do it once.
Exactly.
So it
And there was
doesn't
that,
matter. Yeah.
yeah. And when I was out, it's been really hot weather here in Manchester, which has been convenient. And I've just been out by the canal, New Islington Marina, if anyone's in Manchester. I've just been reading my book there, having a coffee here and there, and it's been quite good and highlighting the book. And I sent you one page in particular
Yeah.
where I was just like, this is freaking stupid. Because, most of the
I
book, I
saw
was
that
like,
message. Yeah, I
yeah,
couldn't
most
read
of
it because I got to like zoom in and try to like read it. But yeah, what does it say?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna try find it quickly if I can. Oh, I can't be
Mhm.
bothered. It's gonna take too long. But basically, the page that I thought was really stupid, because as I say, most of this book, I thought, holy freaking, this is actually good. Like this makes sense. Finally, something that's quite empowering, something about choice, something about free will, something about autonomy, something that actually empowers people. I'm thinking, bloody hell, I've finally found something quite good for addiction, which aligns with what
Mhm.
we say. And in the first half, they kind of downplay, they don't downplay, they actually criticize why some scientific studies don't work because of human consciousness and how powerful that is and how it kind of undermines all of these stupid statements like porn hijacks the brain or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't use porn, but they use other examples with other drugs. But anyway, but then later on in the book, they start using science and research and studies to try and get across why they were right on their perspective on things. And I'm kind of like, well, that's a bit of a contradiction to like go completely against science. And then because of confirmation bias, now you're cherry picking research and data to support your own arguments.
Yeah.
I wasn't a fan of that. And one
Yeah.
of the arguments in particular was really, really bad because it was talking about how when you, I think it was like when you give someone alcohol, right, in these controlled environments in studies, well, they don't end up craving loads more alcohol. Okay. And so therefore, is alcohol, independently, is that substance itself addictive, or is it that people's thoughts and beliefs are changing and maybe it's the rehab that's creating the addiction? And their argument is, well, actually, in these studies, what they've shown is that these substances aren't inherently addictive. They don't have some intrinsic quality that creates this addiction within somebody. And so to say, oh, alcohol is really addictive is bullshit and it's a social construct, is what they're saying, which I think is really, really interesting. But what it doesn't account for is that these studies are going on in a controlled environment. And I think what happens is people are addicted to a mind mood altering experience. They're not addicted to a certain substance or a certain thing. It's like, earlier in the week, I watched that Bonnie Blue documentary, which is about a porn star and it had a shit ton of porn in it and stuff. And I think even if I had have watched that in the days that I was addicted to porn, I wouldn't have ended up getting completely out of control and watch porn necessarily, because it was in this certain kind of environment where, you're watching it on a laptop, you're not seeking out porn.
Yeah.
There wasn't that mind mood altering experience to it, but it was still really, I mean, that's kind of still watching porn in a way. So I think it's really interesting because I think people want that mind mood altering experience, but under a controlled environment, you're not going to get it because it takes away that sort of feeling of, oh,
Content
I want to get out of control. I want to get out of control and I want to do this thing that I feel like I shouldn't
while you're
do. I
doing it.
can't
Yeah.
do it.
Mhm.
Getting out of those feelings of deprivation as well. So I just think it's a completely different thing. And so to use that research about the alcohol and say alcohol's not addictive itself, blah, 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 I think you can pick a really strong flaw in that argument, because I think it's the mind, mood, altering experience, not the substance itself. And I think, but yeah, do you want to kind of talk about that a bit further?
Well, the thing is like all the 12-step and everything, teaching that you're going to be an addict for life is very suggestive, and I've always thought that people could like develop a reasonable relationship with certain substances like that. And I think they say that in the book, don't they? That people
Yeah,
can develop reasonable
moderation. Yeah,
relationship. And the thing is we can spend all this time going, okay, is something really addictive, or is it just with the environment that's suggesting that it's addictive or whatever? And I beg to differ on nicotine. Hello, that shit is addictive. Come on, man. I mean, people know that, but it still comes down to however you define all this stuff. If you're doing a thing that is causing you harm, and you can't stop doing it, you do it even though it's really bad. It's all the bad stuff. You do it anyway. Well, then that's a problem for your life. That's not good. You don't want to live like that. If you could just be like, oh, yep, I'm just not going to do that. Well, addictive, probably not, whatever, but call it whatever the hell you want. All these scientific studies don't really matter all that much. It's like, because, yeah, and like you say, like in the controlled environment, you're not going in there with the intention of seeking out porn or whatever, It's like, so it's going to be a different situation. But to me, it's even like, why spend this energy on that aspect? When if someone's got a thing, they want to stop doing it and they can't. To me, that's where we jump in with the how-to. How am I going to stop doing this? That seems to be the really the only important thing.
Yeah. I agree completely,
In
and
my opinion. Yeah.
I think that also kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that it's your thoughts and beliefs and what's going on in your mind that matters, which is, it's kind of gotten across throughout this book, but then they also kind of provide extra details on certain substances. It's like a whole chapter basically on heroin. And it's like, okay, well, if the problem's completely in the mind and just to do with your thoughts and beliefs, then what value is there in having a whole separate chapter on heroin? It's like with our program, of course,
Yeah.
we talk about porn addiction, sure, like on the outside in terms of the podcast and maybe the blogs, and that's really because that's my story, that's what I was addicted to. But on the inside of the program, we don't really talk about porn much. Like, there's no value in that, because it's literally just about your thoughts and your beliefs and the neural pathway of compulsive desire, and that encompasses everything that you want to stop, whether it's porn, whether it's social media, whether it's eating too much. In this modern day society, I think people really, really need a way to change their thoughts and beliefs, because all these behaviors are becoming more and more normalized. The amount of people I know who are spending hours and hours scrolling on social media and kind of laughing and joking about it with their mates, thinking it's fine. I mean, for me, yeah, I don't want to be part of that world, right? And I think things are getting pretty out of hand. So it's not really about the substance as such. It's about changing the way you're thinking and having a very specific way to go, okay, I've got this desire going on right now. I need to get connected to that, get into that neural pathway, think it through in a rational way, and make a rational choice in that moment, which is actually going to change my brain. It's going to rewire those neural pathways,
Yeah.
which is what we focus on, of course, which I think is very different actually to this book, because there's no this is what you do when you have a compulsive desire in this book. It's just, you're going to iteratively change your preferences over time as you get out of feelings of deprivation, is kind of their approach.
Yeah. You said like we don't talk about porn within the program. Like, we don't. It's like, reminds me of when I used to teach group classes for food compulsion. The ones I'm thinking of mostly were over at this Curbs place, which is a workout place for women, And I remember I had to tell these women, I do not want to know what you ate. The minute you start mentioning food, I'm going to make you write on the board 100 times. I will not talk about what I ate. It's like, it's just not about that specific thing, It's about the compulsive desire, and that's what you want to change, And as far as the screen stuff and your mates, it was like that normalizing now they're making all these jokes about screen time. It's like the new joke. We've talked about it before, the scroliosis and stuff like that, and you deserve to scroll ads, and it's not funny. It's not funny, and it's especially not funny when you look at what it's doing to kids, teaching kids that being glued to your phone is a normal thing. I mean, these little brains, what's happening to them,
Mm.
sad situation. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I think this is just another really strong reason as to why it is about changing the way you think about things and knowing how to deal with compulsive desire. Because what's going to happen with time is there's going to be more and more behaviors that get completely normalized, where even the masses, like the majority of people, will be engaging in behaviors which will be very, very compulsive. They're going to develop these compulsive relationships with certain things, and then you're going to be looking around and like everyone is on their phone, or everyone has these special, I don't know, technological glasses on, or everyone's got a chip in their brain, or all this crazy like technological shit. And you're going to want to know, like, okay, how do I deal with this? How do I change this? Because if everyone's doing something, doesn't always mean it's right. I remember way before you married, like 5 years ago, I read so many psychology books, and it was so interesting because what I discovered is that there's been so many times in history, even in like very recent history, like with the housing crisis and things like that, where the masses make completely irrational choices. Even with the pandemic, if you think about COVID, right, you've got what, 7 billion people, and it's only really like I think Bill Gates who was kind of predicting that there'd be this epidemic. It's like humans are irrational. This is built into us. It's like in our DNA to be and act irrational. And so it's not going to be uncommon for the masses to go and do things that are completely insane and actually really, really detrimental to their own life. And so I think being able to critically think about things, to have your own independence, to be making autonomous choices for yourself is going to be one of the most valuable things you can ever have as time goes by, because I think the masses are going to go a certain way, and then it's going to be up to people for themselves to choose to kind of go against the grain and go, actually, nah, fuck that. Like, I want to live a life in a very, very different way.
Yeah. And oh man, so it's going to be a challenge, to say the very least. I mean, literally, now you see it everywhere all the time. I mean, I just pulled up at my QFC, my quality food store, whatever, and there's a guy next to me parked, and he's morbidly obese, and I look over, and he's got, I mean, his stomach is up like over onto the steering wheel, and he's got his phone sitting on his stomach, and he's just sitting there, just like not like, it's you see that literally all the time now. It's so the norm, and teaching kids that is the norm. It's going to be a challenge, Tom. It's going to be a huge challenge to try to come and go against that grain. But I think one thing that is working in our favor, and I mean, we got to live in this world. It's not like we care that much what people want to do individually with their lives. But, I think what's working in our favor is that basic human nature that's not normal for a human to be doing that kind of thing like all the time and constantly changing the way they feel with some sort of external input or addiction or addictive behavior, right? That people innately want peace of mind. They want solitude, they want silence, they want, you know what I mean? They
Yeah.
want peace, so hopefully that works in our favor and it just doesn't tip over the edge. I mean, it'll tip over the edge in a number of ways, that it's already doing that, and we'll pay the consequences as a society, like COVID, we did with that. I mean, that really, so many like obese people basically lost their lives because of that, because they just couldn't handle that that disease, or I guess it's not a disease, that virus or whatever you want to call it. But there's going to be a lot of big negative consequences, but I think that on some level, humanity is going to want to get out of that and shift back. So,
Well, yeah, we already see it, I suppose, with like
yeah,
people are diagnosing, people with anxiety, depression, ADHD. So there's all these diagnoses. So people know there is a problem. It's just a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, it's the misdiagnosis. Really, it's
yeah,
like figuring out that this is like a societal problem where people are lacking the ability to think through their choices rationally and therefore are choosing to spend countless hours on a screen when actually they've got an alternative choice and they don't have to be helpless. And big tech, as powerful as they may be, can't hijack anyone's brain. Like, they can't make you do anything that
no,
you don't want the consequences of choosing to do. Like, you are the one in control of your life. I mean, obviously the addictive part of the mind might be in there right now, but everyone has that innate ability to think rationally, to live autonomously, to make choices for yourself and completely take back entire control of your life. And I think we just need to kind of, as a culture, pass on that message more and more and more. And then hopefully we're going to have a lot of people go, yeah, I'm sick of, living in this way, and I can live in a happier way, and then start to set a really good example of living that way and sort of stand up to maybe the big tech and go, nah, I don't want to be part of that. But again, it's not even like, you can't really blame Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, because it requires users to use those platforms. No one's forcing anyone to use those platforms, right?
mm-hmm.
So it's still up to individuals to make
Which
their own
get
choices.
kids addicted to them, and it's tough,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is. It is.
and if there's no education for kids that teaches them how to think in a way that they don't just automatically go what which is what they're learning now. I don't know. I don't want to be sound hopeless, but like I said, there's going to be a lot of and there's already a lot of real crashing and burning going on, and one of those things is definitely the ADHD epidemic. The diagnosis, like literally every 5 minutes, it's like, oh, I've been diagnosed ADHD. I've been and like I would say probably 50% of the guys we work with are diagnosed ADHD at one point. And
Yeah.
what came first? Well, the screen and the porn addiction came before the ADHD diagnosis. So I mean that in itself is, there's so many detrimental effects of just dealing with that epidemic. I mean, didn't you say you have to wait 2 years or something to get in to see somebody about ADHD in the UK? You told me
Yeah,
that a while back. Is just, yeah,
yeah, it's pretty crazy. It can be a long waiting time for sure. I think it varies. There's a lot of private practices now and businesses
yeah,
profiting from it, popping up more and more. But anyway, let's wrap it up here then.
yeah,
I think the key thing to take away, if anyone's listening to this, is that The Freedom Model is a pretty good book overall. I think there's a lot of good, interesting
yeah,
research. I think it really helps people unlearn about how modern sort of rehab facilities and a lot of treatment and recovery programs are keeping people stuck, feeling helpless and disempowered. And I would probably be an advocate for, giving this book a read. What I would say though, if you are wanting to be a bit more proactive and really change your neural pathways and focus on, okay, how do I actually rewire my brain in the present moment? This book's probably not going to do that. It's going to be a little bit more of a passive approach towards things, but nevertheless, it's not a bad read. Any final thoughts from you, Mary?
no. That I think that I would like to maybe give it a look, but it sounds like it's very long. Even they
Yeah,
self-proclaimed, they said it was too long or something. Or started out 1,000 pages or something and ended up 400 and something. And I
yeah, they
did
had like
read some reviews on Amazon that said it got pretty long, so, and
yeah,
repetitious. So I may skip it.
yeah. As I
Yeah,
said to you, that first 100 pages or so, I was like, oh shit, this is so good. Like, wow, this is like
yeah,
literally what we've been talking about for like years. Like, oh my God.
yeah.
And then I kind of just got hit by a point where I was just like, right, getting a bit bored now. It's a bit repetitive. But you know, I don't want to like disrespect these guys too much because I think they are really, really trying their best and
Yeah.
their eyes are open, you know, and I think they're probably going to be willing to hear different perspectives and thoughts as
Yeah.
well. And I really hope they listen to this as well. You know, that'd be really cool if some of the authors listen to this.
Well,
That'd be awesome.
I appreciate their validation on something that I've been saying for years, that addiction treatment as it stands, you know, rehab and everything is really making addiction worse. So I appreciate that validation, freedom model people. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Cheers, guys. Hopefully this is useful. If you want to learn more about the Beyond Compulsion method, go to www.beyondcompulsionacademy.com. You can also take a free test on there as well. Get a score out of 100. See how much porn is impacting your life. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks.